To review, Nancy Pelosi said no to impeachment for months. The Mueller report wasn't enough to move the needle. But now the comparatively simple story of what our president said over the phone to a foreign leader has suddenly changed everything. Pelosi in the House moving forward on this idea, and the needle is moving on American opinion. The new Quinnipiac poll shows the country is now evenly split on this issue. But look at how much this has moved since September 25th. The gap has closed on whether Trump should be impeached and removed from office. With us tonight is Doris Kearns Goodwin, presidential historian and author. She has written bestsellers about both Roosevelts, the Kennedys, LBJ, Lincoln, to name a few. Her latest work is Leadership in Turbulent Times. Would you believe it? A New York Times bestseller, which conveniently comes out tomorrow in paperback, removing any excuse not to own it and read it. Welcome back. It's great to have you.
Very glad to be here.
When, in your memory, was the last president who called for the arrest and questioning toward a charge of treason of a sitting member of Congress, more than that, a committee chair?
Thankfully, I cannot remember when the last time was. I mean, the words that are thrown around, I mean, this is really important right now as we go through this impeachment process. We have to define what treason is. We have to define what the rule of law is, what is abuse of power, what is violating the office. You can't just throw words. Either side can't throw words around without explaining it. That's what the country needs so that public sentiment can coalesce if they think that impeachment is necessary to create a consensus. That's what has to be done so the country will not have a Civil War fracture like the president predicted.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about next. You wrote with such beauty and clarity about the Civil War. Can you believe that our president has casually mentioned that among other topics over the weekend?
I mean, when you think about what that Civil War meant to this country, splitting apart literally, more than 600,000 soldiers dying because the North and the South could not deal with slavery in the same way, and that somebody might predict that if we go ahead with the impeachment, there might be a Civil War fracture in the country. I mean, it's the last thing you want from a president who's hopefully going to be the president of all the people, to be able to heal the country. You know, at least during the Nixon impeachment, by the end of it, when Gerald Ford stood up and he said, our long national nightmare is over. We are a government of laws, not a government of men. There was a healing process because the way it was dealt with. And then we've got to hope somehow by the end of this that there's a consensus, if the impeachment goes through, that it was the right thing to do.
Well, following that very crisis, your fellow author, Carl Bernstein, has always said Republicans were the heroes of Watergate. Do you see it possible that the same dynamic could emerge in our time?
I think the question right now, when you think about the Nixon impeachment, was that at the beginning, only 19% thought he should be impeached. And then gradually that number increased as events overshadowed what was happening. At first, Nixon was saying, I had nothing to do with it. I don't know the plumbers. But then you finally have the events. You have the John Dean testimony. You have the people inside the administration being sent, as we know, with Haldeman and Ehrlichman and Mitchell into indictments. And then you have, of course, the tapes. I mean, the tapes were the smoking gun. And by that time, Republicans had to respond to events. So the question will be, how will these hearings educate the country? How will they make the country understand, if this person is above the law, that what that means?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.